Well, I've got Jon Bradley with me for today's conversation. Jon and I go back a long time. He's a fellow of the Consultation Institute. He and I have trained hundreds and hundreds of people in consultation, and we are here this morning having a conversation about engaging communities on the NHS local 5-year plans in England. So, Jon, you once ran a company called Participate very successfully. What are you participating in right now?
Well, some people watching may remember that I used to work for Bang the Table, and we had our Engagement HQ platform, which people use for lots of consultation and engagement. Well, that was acquired by GRANICUS. So I'm now part of a much bigger GovTech organization that helps governments connect, engage, and serve their citizens. So we have a suite of products to help government of all shapes and sizes connect and engage and serve their citizens, really. So obviously consultation and engagement is a big part of that. And I head up the GRANICUS Experience Group here in the UK, which helps people use our technology to create the best online experiences we can. Focus on
this conversation is taking place, is it not? Because you and I were debating the NHS and its 5-year plan exercise.
Yeah, definitely.
And the most onerous requirements, the guidance came out on Christmas Eve, and it basically tells every ICB in England that they've got to engage with and indeed consult with a whole range of known stakeholders, and it says, and the general public. It's a really, really onerous obligation, especially so young in their lifetimes.
Yes, it is, and it's very. I was amazed at the detail of the guidance as well. There's a lot. There's an expectation of consulting a wide range of stakeholders and people in the local communities and representatives that look after different parts of the towns and cities and areas that people live in and access and use health services.
I think we were both expressing a degree of sympathy with those who've got to carry this out, because it's one heck of an obligation, especially as I think I wrote in January saying that the NHS wills the ends, but not necessarily the means. And I think I got a lot of response when I wrote and said, well, does the NHS have the commitment? Does it have the capacity, given all else that's been happening this spring? And also, does it have the capabilities? I mean, do you think they've got the tools and the techniques and the processes in place?
I think they do. They definitely, as was it the Bionic Man? They have the technology. I can't remember now, going back in a bit in time, but they certainly do have the technology, and they do have a lot of lots of in many places the local NHS has very well established relationships with health and wellbeing boards and the local authority, so that quite a few organisations will be able to run quite quickly. But I just think there's the detail of the guidance means that there are lots of sort of things that they can easily trip up on, and just looking at some of the examples out there, the consistency isn't the same across the whole of the NHS, which can be a little bit concerning. Some places have done a bit more than others, and some places have taken a whole different approach to meeting the requirements of the guidance. And
you and I, when we were discussing this, reflected on the fact that there's a difference between consulting stakeholders and organisations and the more general public dialogue. And is it really possible in this day and age to have a dialogue with the, what in some cases 1 million people on the minutiae of a 5-year plan, with all that might be in those kind of long, turgid documents?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly possible. It's whether there's the interest in the out there in the, in the community, whether or not it's something that people think is relevant to them. One of the things especially with online participation is the more personalized experience, where people think it's something they should get involved in. And that's really difficult when you're looking at dealing with 1 million people in something so sort of detailed and hard to get through as a local plan. So we've got quite a few examples where you know, the ICB has set up a really comprehensive online platform to engage people in that more detailed, in-depth dialogue about their proposals. So it is happening.
And the question is whether they can do it in the timescale. I mean, the other issue, I suppose, is there'll be a difference, won't there, between ICBs where the plans are kind of steady as she goes, there's no real radical change, and some of the parts of the country where they really do need to contemplate serious change and where it could be controversial.
Yeah, definitely. I think in some places, you know, the amount of engagement and consultation will be limited, and it won't be scrutinized. Whereas in other places, if somebody does want to slow the process down, isn't happy with the direction that their local NHS is going in, then I think, you know, by scrutinizing the consultation on the forward plans, they'll probably be able to, you know, have a successful, I don't want to say judicial review, I don't think it will come to that, but maybe, you know, have a successful way of stopping the process and saying the consultation wasn't adequate.
Well, I've just written a piece in my blog last week saying that threats of judicial review are coming in thick and fast.
Right.
And my personal view is that there will be 2 or 3 areas of the country where what's proposed in the NHS is going to be very unpalatable to some stakeholders, and they may well mount a legal challenge. Whether it's successful is another matter.
Yeah.
The other thought that I have in my mind is that although it's all quiet on the 5-year plan front at the moment, I mean, I think there are 3 things that are delaying the impact of these exercises. One is the relative newness of the ICBs, and people don't even know who they are at the moment. Secondly is the immense distraction that's been caused by the industrial action and the knock-on effect on waiting lists and everything else. That's stretching comms departments, we know that. And the third thing, of course, is PERDA. So outside London, wherever we have local elections, and they're coming in great numbers on May the 4th, whenever we have local elections, between now and the local elections, there is a limit, a very considerable limit on how much engagement and consultation you're allowed to do. So that's going to put everything back until mid-May, and then the 5-year plans are going to be submitted end of June. I suspect all of a sudden the shit will hit the fan in a lot of localities where there are controversial plans. Now, you and your colleagues in GRANICUS have your ears close to the ground for local authorities, and health and well-being boards are part to play in this. How do you read that situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly, you know, possible, especially with new councillors coming into place. They might choose to slow things down should they want to. Certainly, you know, and you know, those timescales. What's probably more worrying for me is, you know, is the extent to which this is seen as a genuine exercise in the eyes of the public. You know, it's all well and good following the process, but if there's been limited participation, you know, further down the line, when difficult decisions have to be made, and people refer backwards and say, well, we consulted on this in the joint forward plan, everyone throws their hands up and goes, what consultation? You know, I never heard about it. You know, it went on over PERDA, and it was done in a very short time period. So the legitimacy of the consultation and the engagement comes into play further down the line as well.
So maybe we should have another conversation in 6 weeks' time and see whether these things are a bit more visible and maybe a bit more contentious. Last words, John.
Some good examples out there from a technology point of view, some very inviting sites on Engagement HQ, asking people to contribute their views and opinions on the forward plans, and then at the same time some not so good examples where, you know, it doesn't seem to follow the guidance, and that there may be consequences, there may not.
So We'll sign off for now, and in 6 weeks' time or so, we'll come back and look at what the best examples were and where they were.
Yeah, thanks
Bye.
for having me on. Cheers.